This episode of the Unredacted Podcast is brought to you by Dragon Forge Consulting. Dragon Forge provides boutique consulting services for federal and commercial clients looking to expand their business in a turbulent time. Learn more by visiting their website at www.dragon-forge.net. That's www.dragon-forge.net.
Those were the days.
Well, we're kind of privileged today because we've been, I don't know how you hooked this up, but we are sitting in the recording studio for Carasoft.
Yes.
Which is pretty nice.
It's fancy here. I love their facility. It is nice. It is I can't say untapped privilege because it's a frequently tapped privilege of being a Carasoft partner.
That's right.
Especially, I think the office space thing is such a big thing right now for companies, right? And for me, I very much push the shared office space. Like, why have your own giant lease or rental when you can use a shared space? I feel the same way about SCIFs.
Yes.
Shared SCIFs.
Yes.
Shared facilities.
Yes.
We're all competimates and frenemies anyway. So the more we can combine our efforts and work out of a shared facility, like a Carasoft office, for instance, I think that's good for collaboration, good for fiscal conservatism.
Oh, absolutely. Saves a ton of money.
Economies of scale, right for clearance jobs. We do not need a podcasting studio in the D.C. metro, but boy, is it nice to have access to one when you do need it.
No kidding. And this particular building, they've got obviously the workspaces for all the Carasoft employees, but then they also have a huge event space upstairs. I didn't even know about this recording studio, and we're sitting here looking around. They got comfy chairs, they got big microphones, they got video capability.
If you saw the lighting, Brian and I have never looked more attractive.
Yeah, we look awesome.
If we have low lights, high lights, mid lights, green screens, blue screens. It's just sad that you're all missing.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Sorry. Maybe one day we start doing
They can't handle the eye candy, so it's actually better that they don't. We need to value us for our words.
Well, yeah, we don't want to break the internet,
lighting.
Right? You don't want to have that happen. Jeez. And then, I'm already married. I don't need any more, right? It's too much. Okay, maybe.
Please send me your love letters. No, I need words of affirmation, so,
And another rare, I shouldn't say rare, because you're out here a lot, but we're in person again.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, always nice to be in the D.C. metro. It's my favorite city.
Yeah. So this podcast, we have a bit of a mixed topic area because, unfortunately, an incident occurred in the Washington, D.C. area where an Afghan national by the name of Rahmanullah Lakhanwal is suspected of conducting an attack against two National Guards members, West Virginia National Guards member. Unfortunately, Sarah Beckstrom, who was 20, died in the attack, and then Andrew Wolf is in serious condition. He's 24 years old, and it has opened up this debate space around what the United States government's decisions were after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I'm kind of sorting through my feelings on it still. How has it impacted you, Lindy?
I wouldn't say that this attack changed what my posture was before, but it certainly reinforced some of the concerns about it. I think the hard thing about policy, right, is we're always dealing with policy realities today that were influenced by other policy decisions. For me, the biggest thing was I personally disagreed with the way the Biden administration did the Afghanistan drawdown.
I don't think anybody disagrees
so
with that. Yeah.
When you're looking at that stake in the ground, now we're coming up on other policies, and there's a lot of criticism and I know this is what the podcast is going to talk to, like we failed, the Afghanis that we left over there, the people of Afghanistan who we were, but that failure happened at that point.
Yes.
And so I think what we're dealing with now is the implications of trying to work our way back. And yeah, I think it certainly emphasizes that we need a better vetting process. I know that's what they're saying, but I don't know enough about the specifics of this case. I've heard two things specific from this one, is that you had somebody who came into the country who did not have proper vetting. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is. And then someone who, once he got there, this is big for me just for my personal belief structure. I guess there were some red flags in his behavior, right? We do a lot in the insider risk community, security community. He had some red flags that were shown that he was struggling to acclimate as a person here. So I would like to look back through and what are the both nonprofit and personal. I mean, it used to be you had to have somebody personally vouch for you to get into this country. Mm-hmm. I think that's a solid step. Like, you need a battle buddy for the entry point and integration, whoever you are, whatever your asylum immigration status is. And it sounds like, and again, I don't know, this is what the cable news chatter, right? That there were failures on that front too. So then we have to look at it at both sides. Like, was the vetting accurate? Was the infrastructure to integrate into this country what it actually needs to be? But those are separate policy things but really the ground point was like, we failed these people years ago already. Like, we can't actually totally fix that failure, I don't think.
So we've had this particular person come back who allegedly committed this crime. One pretty horrific event out of 120,000 and more, since we've brought more in since. I don't know. It feels like, to me, I'd be very sad if we reacted negatively, because I agree with you. Like, we have an obligation to these folks. It's upholding American honor. Like, they sacrificed for us. We sacrificed too to protect their country. Yes, we didn't win. So guess what? We have to do something that's less than.
But I'll kick back and push back a little bit on that. Please. And then I think this is the crux of where we're at, right? Yeah. I think we have an obligation to those people. I think our obligation to protect American citizens is greater. And I think that's why you're going to get pushback now and say, we have one life lost here and another one, severely impacted and at risk. That's a high threshold when you're allowing people into the country. And I think this is like one example of where you see across the country, a lot of people are pushing on immigration. There's a reason that was a big litmus in the last election. Right. What are our immigration policies overall? What they need to be is our vetting for who comes into this country. We do need to look at how we assign asylum and what the criteria are. And that's where I do say you got to protect the home. There is a deeper obligation to do that than our obligation to the people over there. Because again, we failed them August 2021. Wherever I was, it was probably bad. It was the dark place I was in, not as dark as Afghanistan that day. That's when we failed. So we can't that's where we can't go back and fix all that, and we have a greater obligation to protect the people in this country, and it's going to going to cost and it already has, and we've seen that in Afghanistan. I mean, there was a significant price to pay to allowing that country to roll back to where it was, and that's a big policy debate. I have friends on very polarity on both sides of that. I don't have but that's where it goes to. I've
encountered very few people who say the withdrawal from Afghanistan was awesome. Right? It was horrible, right? And so I was there. I was in the Pentagon at the time. So I was, of course, running the briefing team for the secretary and for all the other principals. So we were seeing the reports as things were going down this path, and we had already said, "Hey, we're going to get out." So we were fulfilling that obligation, and man, it was happening so fast. And it was shocking, at least in Washington, to see how quickly folks who fought alongside with us were just like, yep, okay, so we're done. I'm laying down arms. That's it. Like, not even resisting the Taliban takeover. And I think, and of course, that accelerated things. And I think the part that was the most frustrating was so much was happening so fast, so much information was coming in, and leadership in the building was like frozen. They didn't know what to do. Like, how quickly can we secure these areas? Not fast enough. If you are expecting our allies at the front to protect these lines of control, and they're not doing it, yeah, it happens so fast. So that doesn't excuse it. I think that we kind of knew it was coming, and we knew it was going to be bad, and bad on us, bad on DIA. I don't want to defame the whole agency, because there was a whole community behind it, but I don't know if we did an effective job of communicating the seriousness of it and how fast we thought it was going to happen. And that's going to be something. There's a whole Afghan commission that's going to be looking at that, and they are looking at that. And Bob Ashley is sitting on that with a bunch of other folks that I know that are doing good work. So we'll get a report eventually. They've done a couple of interim ones already, and it's kind of things we already kind of knew. But I do think at some juncture we're going to find out, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well, and hopefully we learn from that. I do agree with you. We do have to protect the homeland first, and I think this vetting process makes us feel good, but people's lives are people. Things are different. There are different stressors, and you can vet someone to the nth degree, and just because you do that doesn't mean that they're not going to do something terrible. And we can go through a whole list of folks that were in high degrees of sensitive places, the Robert Hansons of the world, and the Edward Snowdens. Right? All of these folks went through polygraphs and background checks. They still betrayed our country.
Yeah. Right? Well, and try to vet someone coming out of a country like Afghanistan, right? I mean, it's hard enough to vet somebody coming out of New Jersey, let alone somebody who's, how do you verify that they even are who they say they are?
Right.
I think that's. So I'm not saying it's not a serious problem. And that's why I think the two pieces have to be looked at together. Like, what are we doing for vetting, and what are we doing for integration of the population and support structures once they're here? Because you can't have somebody who honestly passes all the vetting criteria and gets here, and there is a significant culture shock. I think we need to acknowledge that. It's not an easy. So it's so it's ideological, but it's also just the reality of trying to figure out life in a new country, and it's easy to become radicalized in that scenario, or to go down a path that you're not in this country to do. I mean, and it's tough. This is like an example, and the Afghanistan problem is a big one, but we're seeing this conversation about persecuted people across the globe right now, and what our response, reaction, obligation is as America, as the finest country in the world.
That's why
right?
people want to come here. Yeah.
What is our obligation to help those people? Because this is, Afghanistan is one example that I think we take to heart, especially the military community and the intelligence community, because they feel an obligation having served there so long. But I think that's a part of the broader political conversation too, because we have a lot of new ideas, new energy right now. And I think some of those people are saying hey, we didn't want to be in Afghanistan anyway. This wasn't our policy fight.
Right.
Why don't we look at what's going on in Nigeria?
Right.
Why don't we? There's persecuted people other places. They don't feel that same. I think we have to take, again, coming as the Nebraskan, we have to take the DC hat off of it too, because I will say that ownership that exists within the IC and national security community to some of these places is not the same as everyone who's looking and saying, hey, there's persecuted people across the globe. What is our criteria for who we're allowing into the country and not? And should Afghanistan, people who served with us, clearly, right, they've earned the right to that because they served alongside of us.
Sacrificed just as much.
But, there's you could have you have some legitimate push against that too, and why those people get priority over persecuted Christians in other parts of the globe that we're not allowing in right now.
Right, and that's the trade space we have to accept. What's the value and so forth? In this, in my opinion, this is somewhat of a different space in the sense of that I think of these folks as like extensions of our military members. And yeah, they didn't swear an oath to the Constitution, but they might one day, right? If they become citizens here, and that's a hope I think we all have as someone who immigrates here and wants to become a U.S. citizen. And I think that honors our country. So a lot of difficult things to navigate. So we brought on two guests to help us understand that today. Andrew Sullivan, who is the executive director of No One Left Behind. This is a charity that helps resituate Afghan nationals and Iraqi translators. The charity's been around for over 10 years, and they're going to give you some more history about it in the course of the podcast. And then my business partner, Mariah Smith, is going to join us as well. She is the vice chair of the board of directors. And in full disclosure, she's one of my best friends, and we worked a problem together we're going to talk about on the podcast. So with that, there's our interview with Andrew and Mariah.
I always do. I used to actually have hair. It's true.
Do you know what you need now?
If you say cat, I'm gonna.
Yeah, cat pusher
I
Mariah.
wasn't going to say a cat.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say two cats.
Well, that's the thing. If I actually do want to get a cat when I move back,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna get two naturally because
Yes.
it's easier. So
She's putting you on a list. Do you see this right now?
I know.
She's putting you on a list.
She has tried to push cats on me many a times
Cat
before.
pusher.
It really
She-
is.
You think you're signing up for
Look
two.
at these boys. They're
So,
Willie Nelson
see?
and Waylon Jennings.
See?
Willie and Waylon.
You know that I had my dog that just died back in January. Just died as in a year ago. Was named Waylon after
That's
Waylon
right.
Jennings.
Yes, the gray one's named after Waylon Jennings.
God, stop it! Stop. My body can't handle any more
Brothers
stress.
love each other.
Like, oh my God,
I mean, I can
brothers
be
got a
fine.
hug. I mean, that is true.
They could just stay with me until like mid-January until we had to move in.
Yeah, why don't they stay with you, and then we'll reassess.
Right.
Don't worry.
I'll be like, I've got Andy's cat.
Checks in the mail. Yeah,
You're holding cats for ransom.
yeah. It's really a cat arbitrage opportunity.
Well, Andy, Mariah, welcome to the Unredacted podcast.
Were we recording, or were we just goofing
Oh
here?
no, this is all going into the internet.
I'm serious. I would love
Forever.
it. Fantastic.
That
Forever.
was a good like soft opener.
Yeah.
We're always recording all the time. This microphone actually was in your car to capture all the karaoke you were doing as you were coming into the office.
Well, if that was true, you would know that it was mainly soft crying that was happening.
So we were planning to do this for a little while, and then the unfortunate events that took place last week occurred. And so we felt a little more urgency to have the conversation, and I want to return to that topic, but I would prefer us to kind of set the stage for who's talking to us. What do you guys do? Let's talk about the charity No One Left Behind, and let's start there. So I don't know who wants to open there.
Mariah, you've been with No One Left Behind far longer than I have. Why don't you open?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Mariah Smith. I am the vice chair of the board for No One Left Behind. I had a 20-year career in the Army and did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I was leaving, getting ready to retire at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I knew I wanted to stay involved somehow. And No One Left Behind was much smaller then. They were looking for new board members. And so I signed up to be a board member for No One Left Behind. It's a veteran-founded organization, veteran-run now. It's been an incredible experience. So I've been with them since January of 2020.
Mm-hmm. And Andy?
Andrew Sullivan, Andy. I am the executive director of No One Left Behind. I joined No One Left Behind in early 2023, originally as the director of advocacy, and then became the executive director in January of this year. I was drawn to the work because, quite frankly, I had just incredible interpreters from both. Like Mariah, served in both Afghanistan and Iraq. In both countries, I had incredible interpreters that helped keep me and my men safe. And it was an issue that I'd been, kind of working on in a previous role I was a lobbyist that was working on defense and veterans issues, and we started working on Afghan-related issues following the fall of Kabul. And I had a broad portfolio, and working on Afghan issues was my favorite thing. And when the opportunity presented itself to come over to No One Left Behind and focus solely on supporting our Afghan and Iraqi allies, I jumped at the opportunity and am thrilled that I made the switch. My Army career was not nearly as cool as Mariah. I tell people, I think we have 8 out of 9 of our board members are veterans. We have 3 veteran members on staff. I think Mariah has seen more combat and has more deployments than any of us. So I have a career that is maybe a third as cool as hers. But this has been a great opportunity and really the best job that I've had since leaving the Army.
Oh, wow. So tell us about the charity. What does the charity do?
So we are the oldest, the nation's oldest charitable organization that supports our wartime allies from Iraq and Afghanistan. There are a lot of organizations, great organizations, that came in the aftermath or right before the fall of Kabul, so 2021. We actually have been around since 2014. We started relatively smallly. We started as a GoFundMe, a U.S. veteran and his interpreter, great man named Janice Shinwari, who remains with the organization, started as a GoFundMe to support Janice. He received his special immigrant visa, was moving from Afghanistan to the U.S., and quite frankly, we can talk a lot about his story because it's truly incredible. But he was coming here, was worried about, how was he going to, quite frankly, have furniture in his house? How was he going to support moving his family here? They started GoFundMe. It was far more successful than they had ever expected. And because Janice is a true humanitarian, he decided, well, let's take the excess money that I don't need and pay it forward and start a nonprofit. So we've been around since 2014. We have 3 main programmatic areas. We have an evacuations department that supports SIVs as they work through their special immigrant visa. We also support them through housing in Pakistan, through visa support for Pakistani visas. And then this year, I think we'll probably get into this, we've supported them with flights. So we offer no-cost flights for Afghans and Iraqis to come to the U.S. once they have their visa. They have to meet all the requirements of their visa and go through, border control and all of that. But we've moved 3,200 SIV recipients this year from both Iraq and Afghanistan to the U.S. We also have a resettlement department. So, the mission is not over when they arrive here. We want to make sure that they integrate well, that they're thriving, that they're on the path to economic success. So we have a resettlement team that helps with that. We do no-interest loans for cars. We know that vehicles can be really important for long-term economic mobility, so we help support people get cars when they get here. We also do emergency grants for everything from rental assistance to unexpected medical needs. And then lastly, we've had a mentorship program to make sure that, again, as we look at trying to ensure long-term economic success, that we're allowing SIVs to kind of pursue their passion and where they're qualified. Many of our SIVs were lawyers or doctors or teachers, and so pairing them up with an American that can help them here in the U.S. to pursue those really important for us. Lastly, we advocate. So we are a aggressively nonpartisan organization, and we take that. We recognize that all Americans, regardless of party affiliation, should support our wartime allies. There's a national security imperative in doing so and a moral obligation. And we tell that to Congress, both the House and Senate, both parties, and we work with the administration. We work with the current administration. We work with the past administration. We'll work with any future administration to remind them that our wartime allies are important to veterans and they're important to our national security.
That's a great summary. So let's bring the audience kind of into why the Unredacted Podcast or why do this. So besides Mariah and I being business partners, we connected on a very personal level when I was still in government. And Mariah, you were working for No One Left Behind at that time. We're going to roll back the clock. So this would be August of 21.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So what were you doing during this lead up to we knew that the withdrawal was coming. The announcement had been made. We were already ceding ground to the Taliban. We were pretty sure we were in a crisis mode. Where were you at that time?
Yeah, so in August of 21, I had just left my first job after the Army. I had taken a position as a congressional analyst and was moving on to get ready to start working for Accrete AI. But I had a little bit of time off, which is good because, as everyone knows, that is when the Taliban, completed their takeover of Afghanistan and Kabul fell. We had been, knowing that this was coming, No One Left Behind had started a program in July of 21 to purchase commercial airline tickets for people who had already had their special immigrant visas. And when the country was stable, and they still had a path to leave, they were just, taking their time and weren't quite ready to leave Afghanistan yet. But all of a sudden we had some people in July of 21 saw where things were going and were very ready to leave Afghanistan before the full takeover. We booked about 200 families on commercial flights in July of 21 and the beginning of August of 21, and 8 families made it out before Kabul fell to the Taliban and the airport shut down.
So you booked 200?
Yes.
But you got 8 out.
We got 8 out because people had booked themselves. They had picked departure dates later in August,
right.
Because people had to leave everything. So people
right.
were selling homes, turning over apartments,
right.
Getting rid of cars, like packing their belongings,
right.
thinking that we thought we would have about 90 days before the country fully was under Taliban control. And it ended up, I think, just being, like less than 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I was on a very different perch in the building, and we were seeing the reports coming out, and it was astounding to us. Like, these were folks we'd been in country with for 20 years, and the hardest thing to accept was they're just laying down arms. Mm-hmm. Like, huge swaths of territory where we all fought, just being turned right over.
Yeah. Mostly
bloodlessly, and I guess that is a blessing. But, yeah, it hyper-accelerated the timeline. Like, we were totally caught flat-footed.
So go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say agreed. I do put a lot of that on the government. I mean, I think there's no doubt that Ashraf Ghani and the last Afghan government did not cover themselves in glory on that. And so when you look at the throwing down of arms, I think a lot of that ended up being a political outcome from all of the government fleeing. But agreed. I mean, seeing how quickly, when you think that Kandahar fell, I think, on the 13th of August, and by the 15th they were in Kabul. And yeah. I mean, for your audience listeners who have been to Afghanistan, that is hundreds of miles of territory. So agree with how fast it is. I never miss an opportunity to badmouth the Ghani government.
So by mid-August of 21, the three of us sitting here, Andy, me, Brian, and thousands of other veterans and people that had worked in Afghanistan were being inundated with requests for assistance, just any kind of help from our allies and translators that we had worked with. Everyone on the board and staff of No One Left Behind was receiving these requests. And so by mid-August, we had a fledgling evacuation program going where we were working to track special immigrant visa recipients that were still in country, that were contacting us, collect all of their information because a lot of them were afraid to carry their documents on them, or they had, a mixed bag of documents. There were people whose passports were at the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan waiting for their actual visa to be stamped in their passport. The U.S. Embassy had to destroy all those documents as part of ceding an embassy to the enemy and preparing to leave it.
And so everyone's kind of catching up here, like having an American passport in the hands of the Taliban.
A visa.
Sorry, excuse me. You're right. A visa. Like, that's a death warrant.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yep. We're collecting thousands of names and rapidly building a database that has tens of thousands of entries into it. And so probably about by August 20th or 21st, everyone was at home, connected digitally on our laptops, doing 24-hour operations. It was nonstop. A number of us from No One Left Behind did consolidate in D.C. in a coordination cell, as other veteran groups and action groups, I think, were also similarly consolidating. And we began coordinating efforts and getting everyone in one place to at least organize the evacuation effort a little more. And again, at this time...
Something the U.S. government was not succeeding at.
And this is when Brian and I got connected. Like I said, I was getting ready to start a new job. for a Create AI government. And our CEO, Bill Wall, was like, hey, I'm going to put you in touch with someone. He's like, he's working at a government. He's working for the government right now. I'm hoping he will join us at a Crete. But I think he's doing the same thing that you're doing, and maybe you can coordinate on between like intelligence assets and special immigrant visa recipients. So that's how I met Brian Drake. We got connected on email, and we probably exchanged, 600 emails and Slack messages and WhatsApp messages during that time frame before actually meeting at a Create AI in person on our first day at work about a month later.
Yeah, we had a connection over email and the phone,
yes.
As I recollect. Yeah, so I was working at the Defense Intelligence Agency at that time, and so I was in the briefing team. I ran the briefing team in the Pentagon. So we had the secretary and all the E-ring principals. The only folks I didn't have were the policy folks. So in terms of like the spin in the building focused around that issue, like it was a pretty unique perch to be at because we could see everything. We could see the accelerated surrender. We could see things that we were missing. We were seeing things that we cared about as an agency. And so the part that got me a little more animated was at that juncture, there really wasn't an organized effort on the DIA side. Like we had a cell that was being run by a friend of mine, and they were basically like taking in tips. That's it. And the next piece of it was like, well, where those are coming from. It's like, I don't know, somebody gets somebody at a gate, they give them a name, and then they pass it over, and then we would check and see if that person helped us out or it was somehow affiliated with the Defense Intelligence mission. So that was part of it. But the difficulty in that approach was like, those were pretty limited sensors, so to speak. Like, you're not really getting the masses of people that were coming up to Abbey Gate, for example, right? They were on this huge queue. We don't know who they are. Are they affiliated with the U.S. government? Are they not? Like, that was hard. So that's where these spreadsheets that we kept swapping were so helpful, because it was like, here's what we have for critical data. They are claiming that they helped us out. They claim that they had somebody they were working with. Can you go back and check? So that's what I ended up doing, taking those names, giving it over to the cell, then let the cell do the thing. Now, obviously, I couldn't go back and tell you like, oh yeah, Mariah, that's one we got, right? We had to keep that protected, but it was getting us more organized on our end of it. Now, a little more inside baseball at DIA. We had an effort that preceded all of this. It was probably 6 months before everything went bad. And it was the same challenge you guys were having, which was, we want to get you out. Let's plan it now. Well, I'm going to wait and see. Which is interesting, right? Because these folks who you're serving with, right, nearly indistinguishable from our service members, really, they had a lot of faith in the future of the country. They had a lot of faith in the work that we had done together. And it just wasn't there. And I think that's what was so disappointing, was that they believed what we were telling them and what they were working on was worth saving. And they had full faith that it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. It was very quickly not okay. So that's how we connected. And we've formed a pretty strong friendship ever since, and so I've been very grateful for that. If there were any positive outcomes, that was one of them. That was one of them. So after the withdrawal, the hard work came into place. Well, tell us a little bit, like, what was that delta before the fall, after the fall? Now, how has your mission changed or gotten complicated?
I mean, I think you can speak certainly to like immediately after the Taliban seized. Do you want to start there, and I can kind of then go into how it is now?
Yeah. So before the fall, No One Left Behind was mainly a resettlement and advocacy organization. People were coming over on a regular basis, probably about 500 to 600 families a year. We were helping them with initial resettlement assistance, connections, those types of things, and we were advocating on Capitol Hill for the Special Immigrant Visa Program. The organization was much smaller. The annual budget and donations were smaller. We had much less staff. And And then after the evacuation, immediately after it, we suddenly had this enormous both evacuation mission and resettlement mission of, now that thousands of people, new special immigrant visa recipients were in the country, advocacy remained just as important. So seeing because of the attention on the whole leaving our allies behind in August of 21, the organization grew and scaled very rapidly. Fundraising, a lot of money came in during that time to help with evacuations. So the organization, it was necessary, but was able to grow very fast to support the new expanded mission, kind of post 2021. And then, Andy, tell us about now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've continued to scale. Obviously, when Mariah first joined, the board was a working board. I don't believe you guys actually had any full-time employees when you first joined, if I remember correctly.
Not when I first joined,
Yep.
but then Josh came
right.
on board, who is still with us.
Thank God for Josh. Our director of resettlement, Josh Emerson, a Army veteran that served in both Iraq and Afghanistan as well, and was also enlisted, so that he's smart and savvy in a way
Organized,
that Mariah,
hardworking.
yeah, in a way that Mariah, myself, and much of the board is not. So thank God for Josh. But we started hiring full-time staff. We rapidly expanded, and it became much more important. I mean, the evacuation mission became that much more important. Our allies were always under threat when they served with us, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan. They didn't leave those wars. And when they were on leave, the chance of reprisal from the Taliban or from, any of the Iraqi violent extremist organizations that operated there, that was a very real thing for the SIVs that worked with us. So my view is they didn't serve the 9-month or 6-month or 12-month or 15-month deployments that American veterans did, where we would do that, then come home and reset. They were there 24/7. Right. But there was still a level of solidity to the evacuation mission when we still had troops in Afghanistan. Yes, there was the chance that they could be reprised against. Yes, there was the chance they could be killed or hurt while on patrol with us. But fundamentally, the government was, controlled by by JAROA, by the government of Afghanistan, not the Taliban. And there was some U.S. support there. After the fall, obviously, it became much more tenuous and much more scary, and there was far more risk for our allies there. They, quite frankly, star clustered all over the world. Most of them ended up for those that fled Afghanistan, most ended up in either Pakistan or Iran, but many others sought refuge anywhere that they could find that would allow them entry and not deport them back to Afghanistan. So, there's huge contingencies in India and Indonesia, Rwanda, Kenya, places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And so for us, it became much more important to how do we support them given the dire circumstances in Afghanistan? How do we support them with getting their visa approved and then with movement to the U.S.? And so that role certainly took on, just added importance. Our advocacy also expanded as well. As we now saw, again, just the grave impacts of failure, our advocacy really expanded. We brought in Jeff Faniff. Never missed the opportunity to talk about him. Jeff is an absolutely phenomenal human being, was a Marine infantry officer, was a Harvard undergrad, and then said, I'm going to go be a Marine infantryman, which speaks to who he is. Was then at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, so pursuing a MBA at one of the best business schools in the world, and said, I'm going to take a leave to volunteer for No One Left Behind. Well, as we scaled, we brought him on as a full-time employee,
right. And
he just took, a 1.5 or 2 year hiatus from Stanford to improve the Afghan and Iraqi special immigrant visa program. And so he was kind of the first entryway into, our advocacy efforts, professionalizing and expanding. And then when he finally was going back to business school, that was the job that I ended up taking. And so really, No One Left Behind grew because the importance of the mission grew, just given the terrifying consequences of failure for the Afghans that were left behind.
So you both have mentioned a couple of times that we're not talking about one evac, like it's a family. Give us an idea of what that average size of an evac is.
So we actually have it from State Department. So you'll hear people talk about principal and derivative. Principal is the person that actually worked for the U.S. government. And a lot of times for the households, you'll have both husband and wife that work for the U.S. government, but we generally say principal, and that is whoever's applied for the Special Immigrant Visa Program. And with every principal, there is usually 4.2 derivatives. So, a spouse and 3.2 children. Right. So you are talking, bigger families, certainly compared to modern America size families. And many of them are much bigger than that, where you'll have, 6 or 7 or 8 person families. That is a obstacle in and of itself for a lot of the SIVs because, now, especially as they have fled Afghanistan and maybe sought refuge in Pakistan, if they are a bigger family, if they're not that, 5.2 members of the family, but more like 7 or 8, well, one, finding accommodations while you hide in Pakistan for years while your SIV is being processed, that can be very difficult. And then as you try and fly your family and bring them to the U.S., that can also be extraordinarily hard when you think about, 8 airline tickets from Islamabad to Sacramento, California, you're talking probably somewhere in the order of $15,000 or so. Yeah. So average family size about 5.2, but we certainly see larger ones. One of the things that No One Left Behind also focuses on, our number one priority, is solo females. A lot of people think that the Afghans that served with us it was only males. That's not the case. We had a lot of incredibly brave women that served directly on behalf of the U.S. government. They are at extreme risk of gender-based violence, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So for us, one of our number one priorities is moving solo females, those that don't have a husband or a male escort, because, again, the risk of violence to them is so heightened. So 5.2 is the average, but we assist 8-person families, and we assist single women just trying to flee the brutality of the Taliban too.
Yeah, and that's a unique problem in that area of the world, being an unmarried woman?
Very much so. So for travel within Afghanistan, they need a mahram, which is a male escort, male family member to escort them. And if they're not married, especially if they have, the risk kind of compounds on itself. So if you're an unmarried woman, clearly the Taliban and their perverse ideology is a risk to you. But if you're an unmarried woman that worked for America, that risk, or the previous government of Afghanistan, that risk exacerbates. If you are a Hazara, so a ethnic and religious minority, they're Shia, that risk just further amplifies. And so the short answer is yes, it is a unique threat to women there that, by virtue of their service, by virtue of their demographics, can also just exacerbate even further and further.
I did some additional work after the withdrawal through my church, which included bringing meals to families from SIV holders. And I want to talk a little bit more about the resettlement process, but one of the things I was attuned to in the course of doing, because you have to do this cultural training to understand, what you're walking into. And you're a complete stranger to these families, but you're bringing a box full of stuff, and they don't typically speak English. So we had all these ways to hand, here's something written in Dari. I guess we had Dari, Urdu, Farsi. There was multiple languages that basically said, hey, this is a donation for your family. Here's what's included in the box. All halal friendly stuff. But they said it would be very common for a man to knock on the door and someone's there, but they can't open the door because the female is by herself. So you just leave it outside, and then eventually she'll come and pick it up, but you can't open the door. And part of that's safety, but also part of that is respecting the culture. And there's so many little nuances to that complicate the very simple act of trying to get them to safety and then trying to resettle them here. And I learned so much through that process. But I also learned something about our society, especially, of course, we're here in the Washington, D.C. area. We have public transit, and we don't. Right? Mm-hmm. We have the metro system, which services the interior of our city really well, busing a little bit. But if you're living out in the suburbs of Maryland or Virginia, it's pretty hard to get anywhere without a car. Yep. And you're talking about folks that may have never driven a car in their life. So now it's what are we going to do to get them able to get basic services and things like that? So my church, again, sponsored a driving program where I drove folks to medical appointments or shopping or whatever it was. a small contribution that I could give. But let's talk more about your resettlement activities. I know, Mariah, you were running this car program for a little while.
Oh, it is still, and I'll let Andy talk about how big it is now, but we have been doing no-interest car loans for several years now. And it grew from a grant that we received during COVID from a wonderful donor partner who still is with us to do kind of emergency relief, no-interest small loans during COVID. And that later grew into no-interest loans to allow people to buy cars. Because like you said, we quickly realized that having reliable transportation is like the number one stabilizing factor when a family arrives in America. And that program has continued to grow and professionalize every year under Josh as our Director of Resettlement, and with a lot of work from all the staff on professionalizing this no-interest loan program. And I'll let Andy talk about how it is now.
Yeah. So we are currently, I believe it's like 86, if I remember the number exactly, loans that we currently have that we're servicing, that we've given out. So that's 86 families that have cars because of the incredible work of Josh and team. We're still trying to expand it. And so we have some pretty exciting ideas going forward about, can we get greater donor participation if we actually treat the donations that come to us as a recoverable grant. And so, donors donate to us. We lend to the SIV recipients. The SIV recipients pay it back, and then we actually can pay back the donors. And we think that's going to open up just a really novel pool of capital for us. Because for the donors' perspective, this is their opportunity to help people right now, then get their money back and help more people. And so
that's great.
Yeah, we're very excited about it, and we're launching a pilot here in the beginning of the year. One of our incredible donors has already given us $100,000, and so we're going to be looking at doing potentially 12 to 15 or so cars for SIVs, and so it's something that we're going to continue to scale. We've implemented new kind of loan tracking software. With love and respect to Mariah and the board, when it first came out, it was a whole bunch of Excel
spreadsheet, right? Yeah.
The Google Sheet tracking. We now have software, a program called or software as a service called Happy Mango that helps us track and professionalize. The other thing that has been interesting and we continue to expand on is for us to do loans, we actually have to we can't just do it. We actually have to get the proper accreditation per state.
Interesting.
And so we continue to add more and more states. I think we're around 20 right now that we can actually loan in, and we're going to continue to add more. Our big kind of white whale is California. The regulatory environment just has the kind of most hoops to jump through, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to get that here within the next year because there are plenty of California-based SIV families that could use the assistance. And so we want to make sure that we're able to assist them. So we continue to just expand the program.
So even though you're not charging interest, you still have to be like a fiduciary in each of these states?
Every state is different. So some it is what is the overall size of the loans that you're doing. Some of them are if you are not charging interest, then they can sign off. Some are if you're just a C3, you can sign up. So every single state has different requirements, which has its own set of complications as we look at how do we make sure that we are accredited to lend in those states. And
that's wild.
But I will also say one other thing. We have had some incredible pro bono legal support, and we actually do have an incredible law firm that is assisting us with doing exactly that. So
I'm hoping you're going to name more of these places because then we can just charge them sponsorship fees. So Happy Mango's getting an invoice.
We actually pay for them, so they can be invoiced. The pro bono legal
this
support,
isn't free here. We got to keep this thing running.
Absolutely.
So the law firm is.
So we have
better be a big one.
Foley Lardner is
okay. Good. That invoice is going out too. Okay, good. we get it down. What's some other stuff you do to help for resettlement besides the car loan program?
One of the exciting things that we just started this year, we did our first round of, is something called the America's Allies Scholarship Program. So with the incredible assistance and partnership of our friends at Afghan Future Fund and KKR. We issued over $110,000 in scholarships this year. It's everything from people that are from Afghan and Iraqi SIVs that are seeking, master's programs to folks that are seeking HVAC certifications or their CDL. Our view is, how do we help the most amount of people? And that may not always just be a bachelor's degree. And so we issued, it was scholarships up to $20,000 to 19 different incredible Afghan and Iraqi SIV recipients. We're hopeful we're going to start sharing some of their stories, because the students that we selected are truly incredible. The demand was outrageous. We were like, are we going to be able to get this out there? Are people going to resonate to this? We opened up the application knowing that we're going to be able to support somewhere around 20 or so SIVs. In the first 2 weeks, we had 500 applications. We ended up having over 840 applications. So I quip that the America's Ally Scholarship Program is more selective than the Rhodes Scholarship, which it is. That math checks out.
Yeah,
I checked it.
Yeah.
So the demand has been incredible. I think it's very clear that our SIVs, they come here with incredible skills, but they certainly want to continue to improve themselves. Education is a great way to do that. So we had just an overwhelming outpouring of applications, and it's certainly something we're going to continue doing. We're really excited to see the students, thriving in their first semester since we've done the scholarship program. And it's something I'm hopeful we're going to be able to do again next year. So one of the fun new ways that we're finding to support our SIV recipients.
And I will say that one of the very first donors to that program was our senior advisor, General David Petraeus, who was at the kickoff event with us. We're really, really grateful for his support, and would love to see that program continue and expand. That's
incredible. Is it? Another invoice going to KKR. So, everyone got that right? Something we keep saying, and I kind of tease out for folks, is that we're talking about a sacrifice in so many different ways, putting their life at risk. One of the ones I don't think we fully appreciate is, and I'll use the family I was working with as an example. The patriarch of that family, he was both a plumber and an electrician working on U.S. Embassy infrastructure and other sites around the country. And he was granted his SIV and was brought over, but he came to the States. It's pretty hard to be a plumber or an electrician unless you're in a union, have gone to vocational schools for it, have the certifications. That's a big barrier here. And I understand why. We have codes and building enforcement and all these things that we have to follow. And so you don't just willy-nilly let anyone be a plumber. You want to be sure that they're fully bonded, insured, and all those things. But wow, if you're coming in, and he was close to my age, right? So he was really senior. Not that I'm that old. Everybody.
No, you got more hair than me, bro.
Yeah. Let's keep that in mind. But consider he's leaving the entire career that he had and built, and that revenue stream that was very reliable for the size of the family that he had, and now he comes to America and he has to get a job. And what is available? If you can't pursue your vocation, you either have to get into a retraining program to get you back to learn the things you already have learned, but now you get the certifications that are necessary to get bonded and insured. I think it's all these little things that we don't fully appreciate. You don't have a car, you don't speak the language, you don't have a job, you don't have a house. So they show up here. What's the support that they get? Right?
What you've just described is something that we see all of the time. And it's certainly people that are involved in kind of blue collar work, like being a plumber. We see it with people that, they would make excellent lawyers, but they're going to have to go past the bar. I mean, they've been trained, they have a legal mind. Lawyers, nurses, you can absolutely save lives. You did in Afghanistan. We have a healthcare shortage, or a healthcare worker shortage here in the U.S., but unfortunately you're going to need the time to make sure you're properly accredited. You have the right accreditation, and a lot of times, unfortunately, the schooling and the education you got in those countries does not transfer.
Right.
So it can be both just relatively easy to fix accreditation. It can be much more complex where your degree no longer works. And so we are finding that people can struggle. We see a lot of work in the gig economy, which it can be an incredibly helpful first step for our Afghan and Iraqi SIVs. And we have had partnerships with both Uber and Lyft, and absolutely incredibly supportive of our work, and we're very thankful for all that they've done for No One Left Behind, and more importantly, the Afghan Iraqis that we serve. But we find that there are a lot of people that are engaged in gig economy work to just try and keep, food on the plates for their family, and don't have the opportunity to have the time and space to get the requisite, credentials done, or to ensure that their, degree is interpreted and transferred so that they can do the professions that they were trained in and have the skills to do. So it can be difficult, and that's when we do our emergency grants. It's those folks that have just recently arrived that we really try and focus on to give them, the space to meet those kind of requirements so they can thrive.
So, to level set for everybody here, this podcast is nonpartisan. Your cause is nonpartisan. So this question is not coming from a place of where I'm being critical of the environment, but I think it behooves us to acknowledge that when the new Trump administration came into place, immigration was clearly on the agenda, and lots of reasons why. The SIV program was being scrutinized at this point in time. Can you kind of walk us into what were the issues on the table at that juncture? Not today, but at that earlier juncture.
So it's December 4th, so we can talk about what happened in the last 9 days. But prior to the shooting in D.C. on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we had, to your point, I think a lot of what President Trump campaigned on was immigration reform. I think there was a view amongst a lot of Americans that the southern border was porous and maybe was not controlled in the way it should be. The Trump administration took a bunch of actions immediately upon entering office. We looked, I believe there were 12 that were generally immigration related, and 3 that impacted us that came out. There were executive orders that came out on January 20th, the day that he was sworn into office. And we were concerned about what their impacts were going to be on SIVs, and certainly there were some impacts. There was a pause to the refugee program, which did not directly impact the special immigrant visa program, but we do find that there are some great wartime allies that maybe don't fit the precise legal definition of SIV through no fault of their own, but they just maybe don't have the right amount of time in service, or they work for a contractor that wasn't covered, or they worked for the Afghan National Army and maybe saved American lives, but because they were paid by the Afghan National Army, they're not SIV eligible. They've had to avail themselves of the refugee program. So when we saw the pause to the refugee program, it didn't necessarily impact SIVs, but it did impact populations that we care about. We also saw changes to U.S. foreign aid, and that was a big one because a lot of the support that was required for our Afghan SIVs especially had been part of a foreign aid budget, and that was paused, and so now we saw kind of dramatic effects to the SIVs. Lastly, the EO we were concerned with was a reexamination of vetting criteria for different countries. And the EO basically tasked Department of State and Department of Homeland Security to look at all countries to see where can we, properly screen and vet people for admission to the United States, not just under a special immigrant visa, but just admission to the United States generally. We were worried that that would be a travel ban for SIVs. It ultimately wasn't. So a restriction on travel did come out, I believe in June, maybe it was July, but I'm fairly confident it was June. SIVs were exempted from that. So the Trump administration, specifically exempted them in a travel ban that did prevent travel for Afghans for a lot of different visa categories. SIV is not one of them. So yes, I think the administration certainly has a jaundiced eye in a lot of ways to certain immigration programs. The SIV program was not one of them. And specifically in the proclamation that had the travel ban, they were exempted by President Trump, and so we were thankful for that. We can talk about what has happened since the shooting in D.C., but I do think it's important to note that because the SIV program is so bipartisan, because there are so many members of the administration that served alongside our Afghan allies. I mean, I think the very first National Security Advisor, now UN Ambassador Mike Waltz, served multiple tours. He had been a longtime advocate of the SIV program when he was in Congress. People like that are littered throughout the administration, both at the principal level and then also on down at the deputy principal level. There are plenty of veterans that understand the sacrifices of our Afghan and Iraqi allies, and I think that was a big reason. Secretary Hegseth himself, also a veteran of Afghanistan, that gets it. So I think throughout the administration there are people that understand it, and that was why Afghans were exempted from that travel ban despite the other changes to U.S. immigration policy.
Yeah, so let's fast forward now into more recent times. This shooting occurs. Where were you when you heard it?
I was back in Pennsylvania. And when the first news came out, obviously was praying for the safety of the two wounded National Guardsmen. Wasn't sure who it was, and then when I saw that it was an Afghan, my heart certainly sunk. I think it's important to note that centering Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, centering Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf is the most important thing right now, and that's certainly how we've approached it. Is the policy changes are the policy changes, and we understand that, but the families of the impacted are the most important thing, and that is when I found out kind of what I was most focused on.
So after you've digested the news, now you spring into action here, right? So what's the charity? Describe to us kind of what the charity then decided to do, and how did you guys get active?
So when we saw that it was an Afghan national, I think we knew that there were going to be policy changes that happened. And quite frankly, I understand the president's imperative to look at a holistic review of the factors that led to this. I think it's premature to say why the shooter did what he did. There's been a number of different theories that have posed. From what I've seen, the majority of the reporting seems to indicate it was a mental health crisis. There have been reports that he could have been radicalized here in the United States. I believe the Secretary Noem said that on the Sunday shows. There's also a report that came out, I believe, either just yesterday or the day prior, and so far it's just a sole source report that said potentially he could have been coerced into doing it. So the Taliban or a different violent extremist organization in Afghanistan could be threatening his family and convince him to do that. So, for us, we knew that it was going to be, the policy changes were bound to happen. There was going to be a fulsome review. We think it's premature to do a whole lot of policy diagnosis if you don't actually know why this happened. But our view has been, how do we work with the administration to make sure that we do review the factors that led to this, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have always approached this is not just a moral obligation. This is a national security imperative for us. That is why I got into the work. I think it's a national security imperative both in the short term and the long term. In the short term, Brian, the people that are going to help us root out violent extremists that emanate from Afghanistan or elsewhere in the region, they're not going to look like you. They're not going to look like me. They're not going to speak English. So I believe short term, it is really important to leverage the incredible Afghan wartime allies that came here that are going to be the best humanitors that we have to find people that would do Americans harm. In the long term, I believe that making sure that we fulfill our promises to allies, especially allies of our longest war, is important for future conflicts. The U.S. is engaged all over the world right now. I mean, we're doing strikes in the Southern Caribbean and in the Pacific. So we're engaged in kinetic activities there. We have a major land war in Eastern Europe. We have a major, I can't even call it conflicts in the Levant right now. We have China with ambitions on Taiwan. America is going to go abroad again. We're already abroad. We will need local partners in every one of those places as translators, as logisticians, as humanitors, all of the things. And I want to make sure that we win those partners and not our adversaries. And so doing right by our partners from our last conflicts is a great way to make sure we win those local partners. That's the argument that we make. So as we, in the aftermath of this terrible shooting, as we re-examine American immigration policy, I want to make sure that we're tailoring it and we're still doing right by all of those important wartime allies that are going to help us with the things I just described. So that's kind of how we've approached this in the aftermath of the shooting.
You just put something on the table I guess I hadn't fully thought about, is that it is in the interests of, well, we could say formally Al-Qaeda, but I would say that they probably are still constituted just in a smaller form, the Taliban, ISIS. It is in their interests to see the SIV program fail.
100%.
So if we were to allow them that victory, it's yet another failure of our resolve. And I hadn't thought about that until you started to put it into more of a geopolitical context. Of course, yes, it is our solemn, Brian's opinion, our solemn vow and honor, our duty to return these folks that sacrifice for us to safety. I find very few people that argue a counterpoint to that. It always comes back to the how and why and so forth. And I understand those debates. The part that is difficult to negotiate around, and I think merits more attention, is if we were to allow policy changes which fundamentally change the program so that it is either more difficult or completely impossible to come to the United States after you have honorably served the United States, we're not doing anybody any favors. In fact, the only people we're doing favors for are violent extremist organizations and the allies of those organizations.
You had mentioned that you were part of DIA. Do you think that it is going to be easier to recruit sources if they think that America's like, well, sorry things went sideways, best of luck, you're on your own?
Exactly. And I'll tell you, there are intelligence services that do that. The Russians, the Chinese, as soon as you are no longer valuable to them in the moment, they cut you. And sometimes that ends very violently. Sometimes it ends, probably morally terrible, right? You become dependent upon the relationship and so forth. Yeah, we are better than that.
Yeah. I would also point out, and I don't want to hide things. Maybe your listeners are aware of this. I think everyone's obviously aware of the shooting that happened. It's been in the news. There was actually, so that happened on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The next Tuesday, the story broke the next Tuesday, but the Tuesday prior to that story, there was a man that was arrested in Dallas. He was an Afghan national that arrived during the evacuation. He was not an SIV recipient, but he was making TikToks threatening to blow up, something in Dallas, was angry at America, was, just hate-filled, wanted to commit some sort of spectacular attack. He was making TikToks in Dari, and he was turned in by the Afghan community and arrested. And it didn't get much exposure at the time. Then the shooting happened, and then that story kind of broke into some national consciousness after the shooting. That is what our Afghan allies are. I mean, you have to remember that these are people that risk their own lives, that risk their families' lives to serve on America's behalf. They still very much have a vested interest in rooting out people that would do America harm. And so that is one small example of somebody that would do harm to Americans that was taken off the streets by our Afghan allies. A lot of people are not familiar with that story, but just in the last 2 weeks, that's not unique.
Well, and we've lost sight of this, but consider the folks that took that action were living under a government where you could report people for things. Sometimes that would work out for you. Sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes they would think you're in league, and you get arrested or something worse right along with them. So it takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, that's not okay. You're kind of ruining it for the rest of us, bro. Totally. And yeah, right. That's what we want to have here. We want folks that love the country and want to be here and contribute to it, and they already have. And I think that's part of the I guess my frustration with, I understand why we do the vetting and so forth, and it is important. But a lot of these folks have already kind of shown their mettle. I'm not sure why continuing to pick at that helps us.
Yeah. So I think in the case of the Special Immigrant Visa Program, you are 100% right. And I'll tell an anecdote when I'm done with this point that illustrates that. But I understand the imperative to look at the different vetting that happened. And the reason I say that is America, across every administration and across every Congress since the global war on terror began, has not done what we needed to do for our wartime allies. And so we didn't do the Special Immigrant Visa. We didn't invest in the Special Immigrant Visa Program in the way we should have before the withdrawal. And so during the withdrawal, you had, this massive evacuation that brought 82,000 Afghans here. And the overwhelming majority of them were properly vetted. The overwhelming majority of them did arrive under different humanitarian parole, different immigration pathways than the SIV program, though. And I get the imperative to want to look and make sure that people weren't missed just in the frenetic nature of that withdrawal. Because both DHS's OIG has found and the FBI have found it's a non-zero number. It's small, but it's a non-zero number that didn't get the requisite amount of vetting, or the vetting missed something that it shouldn't have. So I am very sympathetic to looking at folks that arrived during the withdrawal. Again, my point about using a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, remains. For the SIV program, you're 100% correct. Not only does the SIV program have a in-person interview and a rigorous interagency background check and all of this screening and vetting that goes into it, but they were screened and vetted, our SIV recipients were screened and vetted day in and day out by virtue of the service that they performed. The anecdote that I was going to mention. The reason that I got into this work was my interpreter in Afghanistan, and I'll just give his last name because he still has family there and he's worried about their safety, but Ahmadi. Ahmadi is an incredible human being, but I find that he is not unique. He is indicative of the Afghans that served with us. And I realized it early on in our deployment. It was our very first firefight in that tour. And I was a rifle company commander at the time. I had a American soldier, really smart American soldier, but it was his first deployment. That was my radio telecommunications operator, RTO. And so in this firefight, I had to tell him, like, hey, make sure you're relaying this to battalion. Hey, make sure you've done this. Hey, what did second platoon, like, I had to kind of pull and push him to provide the right reports. It was his first firefight, totally understandable. And, by the end of the deployment, he was God's gift to the infantry, and he's amazing. But for that first one, it was like I had to kind of work with him. Well, that first firefight, I also had Ahmadi at my side. And the firefight happened when we had a, Kandak, a company worth of A&A that were to our left and right that were working with us. And I didn't have to tell
Afghan
him.
National Army for everyone, A&A.
Apologies, yep. So Afghan National Army unit that was to our left and right. And I didn't have to tell Ahmadi anything. I would, I'd be like, hey, make sure that, first Kandak is tracking. He's like, yep, already told him. He's like, oh, and by the way, second Kandak is, maneuvering around to the east. And, then like 5 minutes later, I'd be like, hey, let him know I'm establishing a mortar firing position. He's like, yep, already did. Because he was just listening to what I was saying to my subordinate platoons, what was being relayed higher, and he was just immediately intuiting what he needed to do. He understood the geometry of the battlefield in the way that a company commander would. And so when we get done with the firefight, I ask him, I'm like, Ahmadi, how the hell did you know how to do that? Not just the interpreting from, English to Dari to English, but how did you understand all of that without, me telling you? He's like, oh, I've been doing this for 5 years. I mean, he had served from Logar to Kandahar to Helmand, had, been in the Battle of Marja, and now was meeting me in Zabul. And so this was old hat for him. And at the time, this was now my third deployment, and I thought I was God's gift to the infantry, and and in that moment I felt pretty small because I realized that okay, cool, I had some Iraq deployments, and I came home and goofed around and went to Captain's Career Course, and this guy had been at war on America's behalf for way longer than I had, continuous. His vetting occurred. He got his SIV, came here in 2016. He was vetted as part of the SIV process. His vetting really happened every freaking day that he served alongside American troops because I knew that I could trust him with my life. I would do things that probably I shouldn't have done, but I'd be like, hey, man, I'm going to take a piss. Here's my gun. So it's that level of vetting that occurs day in and day out that is not necessarily formalized in the SIV process,
right, but
is indicative of the caliber of humans that come over.
So in tragedy... And it is a tragedy. There is opportunity to do better. Is there something that you would, if you had the ears of and I think you, the organization, and you and Mariah both have the ears of policymakers. What's some things that you would recommend to change?
I'll give you one for both domestic and domestic that's already happened, and then one that would focus and address future conflicts. So. We have endorsed the Afghan Adjustment Act back in the 117th Congress, we're in the 119th Congress now, but back in 2022 when it was first introduced, we endorsed the Afghan Adjustment Act. We continue to call for the Afghan Adjustment Act. The Afghan Adjustment Act would would have the Afghans that arrived as part of the evacuation go through a second round of security vetting as part of their movement towards lawful permanent residency here in the U.S. We thought it was important to, one, not send them to the asylum system because that is so backlogged and crazy in its own way. We said we need to have a more streamlined system, and that more streamlined system also should come with another round of security vetting so that we can make sure things like this don't happen. Unfortunately, in both Democrats controlled both chambers of Congress in the 117th and the 118th. It was a split Congress, and then the 119th Republicans controlled both chambers. In all of those Congresses, the Afghan Adjustment Act never received a hearing or markup in the Judiciary Committee, regardless of which party controlled the committee in either chamber. It never made it to the floor for floor action. There were some amendment votes to possibly include it, but it never got a full vote as a standalone bill. So Congress, quite frankly, missed that opportunity. I don't think it's too late. I think it makes sense. Congress should have a role to play as we re-examine and as we think about security vetting. So the Afghan Adjustment Act, I think, it's more important than ever, and I wish Congress would have actioned it sooner, but it's not too late to do it now. Going forward, I talked about the frenetic nature of the withdrawal because we didn't, invest in the SIV program up front. I think that's a very real thing that we need to address in future conflicts. I think many of our SIVs were not directly employed by the U.S. They went through a contractor. They directly served on behalf of the U.S., but the actual employment may have come through a contractor. Tasking those contractors that are paid by the U.S. government to keep more fulsome records and to proactively catalog the service of our most trusted allies, I think is really important so that we can have a more forward-facing system that says, okay, Mohammed John, you have served a year, you're now eligible, and we can take that step now rather than wait and have applicants have to try and prove their eligibility years after the fact. I also want to see the SIV program expanded. We've been talking a lot about Afghanistan. Right now, we have special operators in Syria that are still fighting the remnants of ISIS. Their threats in Syria are multifaceted. It remains to be seen, I think, what the new government of Syria is going to look like. But if you look at the threats over the last 10 years that we've been there, especially for our Syrian interpreters, they were helping us in the fight against ISIS. You had Iranian-backed militias, Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah. Quite frankly, you had the Assad regime that was trying to target them. A lot of threats to them. There is not an SIV program for them. So as we look at... There is not. There is no SIV program for them. It just exists. There are really 3 SIV programs that we work on. One specifically for Afghans, one specifically for Iraqis, and then one that is a smaller one that gives only 50 visas a year, and it's for both Iraqis and Afghans, but they had to have been specifically translators. There is nothing for Syrians. Wow. Yemen, there were special operators in Yemen throughout the Sahel. My view is if you or your family's life is at risk because you helped facilitate our operations, whether they be kinetic military operations by working with our special operators, you facilitated diplomatic operations for us, or you assisted our intelligence community professionals, then you deserve to have a pathway to safety. I don't think you should be left to hang out to be killed. These aren't massive numbers that we're talking about either. I mean, when we think about, we'd mentioned earlier in the conversation, the Trump administration's view on the southern border and kind of some of the dysfunction at the southern border. We're not talking the millions of people that have arrived via these other immigration pathways or that came across the southern border. We're talking in the hundreds for these locations. But, albeit small numbers, incredibly instrumental in our efforts in those locations. So as I think about what is something going forward that we should be doing, it should be a more comprehensive SIV program that allows for immigration and that allows for a pathway to safety for folks that directly serve with our troops, diplomats, or IC professionals at great personal risk, regardless of geographic location. Because global war on terrorism, you know what the first word is? Global.
Global.
It's kind of operative.
Right.
And so my view is it should not be restricted to just Iraq and Afghanistan.
That's wow. I just learned something, right? I didn't understand that. I had understood special immigrant visa, the program, to be like just a category, just like how we have for, hey, we have this entertainer from Canada, the Ryan Reynolds law that says we're going to let you immigrate to the U.S. and you can become a citizen in an accelerated pathway. It feels like to me that's where we should be. It should be a special category that says if you meet this criteria, actor in Canada,
handsome gin brand owner,
right, exactly, right, entrepreneurial, bringing money into the U.S. If we can have criteria like that for that category, why can't we have the same kind of criteria for an SIV program that's a permanent staple of immigration policy.
I totally agree. I do want to just, for clarification, there is a permanent SIV program that exists and is geographically agnostic, but it requires somebody to have worked for that embassy for 15 years.
Wow.
So really, it's not necessarily people that are taking. The aim, I should say, isn't necessarily for people that are taking like extreme risk to help us, prosecute terrorists, but it's more like, okay, you served for 18 years in the embassy
As a desk officer.
Yeah, exactly. Then you can come over. So don't begrudge that program at all. It seems to make sense to me. I was an intern in the State Department of Malawi. We had some great local nationals that I think would make great future Americans. So not begrudging that program, but I don't think it's meeting the requisite need that we're talking about here with people that are helping us prosecute Al-Shabaab. Right. Or ISIS in the Maghreb. That is the kind of people that I think we also need to have a more flexible flexible SIV program to support.
Does that require a legislative change, or could that be administratively done?
It needs a legislative change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's something we have been trying to work and push on. Unfortunately, with less success than I've wanted.
So how can our listenership help? What can we do to support this cause?
Well, one, I think much of your listenership is, veterans, members of the IC, or have friends that come from one of those backgrounds. Tell your story. Continue to tell your story about the incredible Afghans, Iraqis, or other nationalities that you served with that have been invaluable to American national security. That's, number one. Number two, tell that story to your member of Congress, your senators. Make sure they know this is important. Number three, if you want to get involved with No One Left Behind, I would love that. We are a firm believer that volunteers are the lifeblood of the organization. So we would love to have you come, volunteer some of your talent to No One Left Behind. And then lastly, money is important. We are totally privately philanthropically funded. We've never received any money from the government, which is great because it lets us be honest brokers about when the government is falling short. And so if you have the ability, we certainly would love for you to donate to the cause. For the donations and or volunteering, they can go to, your listeners can go to nooneleft.org. That is all one word, and NOONELEFT.org. And you guys can't see me, but the beads of sweat that are just rippling off of my head as I tried to publicly spell
a website.
Really something. Yeah, truly. Use Google and search No One Left Behind.
Well, we're definitely going to put that in the show notes, so if folks can see the show notes, they can click in the link, and we'll put the donation link there as well.
I really appreciate it, Brian.
Yeah, of course. Again, this is a topic that's really important to me and to my co-host Lindy, and so we want to be sure that the worst thing we can do at this juncture is make policy in duress. And I think we are all experiencing duress over this whole situation, and we have a lot of questions that we're going to have to confront to build faith back with those who have good questions to ask. We would, though, if we react too harshly and quickly, we are doing another injury to something that, I do not know the personal beliefs of Sarah or Andrew, who are the two guards people that were shot, and Sarah's no longer with us. But I would expect that they would say something similar, that, these folks sacrifice just like we do. So let's uphold our honor. Let's uphold our honor. Okay. And on that note, thanks so much, Andy. Thank you so much, Mariah, for being here.
You bet.
We've really appreciated your insight and telling the story. And see you next time on the Unredacted Podcast.
I'm Lindy Kaiser.
And I'm Brian Drake.
And this has been the Unredacted Podcast.